today in times of crisis in Israel, and in fact a crisis which is probably, which Israel has never seen in that way. In the 75 years of its existence, which Israel will celebrate in a few weeks, Israel has faced wars, Israel has faced intifadas, Israel has faced waves of immigration, economic crises, but never before has Israel faced the imminent danger of civil strife as it does today. We heard it today from Prime Minister Netanyahu, we heard it from President Herzog recently, who said Israel is in danger of breaking apart. There are many reasons for this situation, and of course, one of them, maybe first and foremost, is the unsolved issue of Palestinians and Arab citizens in Israel as well. But besides the Jewish-Arab gap, there is also the religious-secular gap, the left and right-wing gap. There's the gap between, there's still a gap between Mizrahi, meaning Jews who came from Arab countries, and Ashkenazi, European Jews. There's a gap increasingly also in the last years and for a while now between rich and poor. And there is another element that makes it extremely hard today to find an easy exit out of the present crisis. In his visionary book, The Jewish State, the founder of the Zionist movement, Theodor Herzl, wrote, "One of the great commissions which the Society of Jews will have to appoint will be the Council of State Jurists. These must formulate the best, that is, the best modern constitution possible." That's what Herzl said in 1896. As we know, after the real Jewish state was founded in 1948, Israel can be proud to have reached so many important achievements, from great educational institutions like the Hebrew University to being called the startup nation. But a constitution was not yet among Israel's big achievements. So many of us may ask today, what if Israel had a constitution today? And why does it not have a constitution? Might the present dilemma perhaps lead to Israel drafting a constitution? Or does, as some might argue, or does Israel actually have a constitution, which is the sum of its basic laws? Well, no one more appropriate and competent than our speaker tonight can answer these questions. Professor Menahem Ben-Sasson was in fact the last person, maybe even the only one, at least in many decades, to take it upon himself, and he was, of course, asked to do so, to try very hard to give Israel a constitution when he was not only a member of the Knesset, but the chair of its Constitution, Law, and Justice Committee between 2006 and 2009. And I remember vividly when we talked in that time, how he discussed with me the many constitutions of the world he read and collected, and which country's legal approach would fit Israel best. So we are very privileged to host Professor Ben-Sasson tonight, and please join me in welcoming him.
Good evening to everybody, Dean Starr, other dignitaries. I am humble and moved by your presence. It took years and events of the last 2 months that Constitution will go back to become a topic of interest. I remember myself trying to preach on it, convince people in the streets, go to sessions, even at university. People were doubting whether it is doable or should it be done. And I was never sorry, as I was in the last 2 months, that we failed to write it at the end. So we finished the work. I can give it the not happy end 250 articles, 15 chapters of the Constitution were supposed to be voted as a present to the State of Israel in its 60th anniversary, 2009. The Knesset was opened, as you heard today, in 1949. And I fooled myself that I'm capable of voting on it. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister resigned in the middle of the summer, and everything fell apart, and somebody has to take the building blocks, if somebody wants, and to try to remake it. I tried later on, if you'll ask, I'll give you some ideas to try to preach for that in the Knesset. I failed, and as I said, it's a great problem. What you see are two huge demonstrations in Israel, one versus the other. One is of the ultra-Orthodox demonstrating against drafting of their people to the army. 2014, it was a successful, and nobody dreamt afterwards that one can draft such an amount of rejection to the army, and who wants people who do not want to serve in such a case. Supreme Court made us rethink the idea. Equality is part of the ideas, and we tried, and I hope that we'll try again. Below you see the latest. A few weeks ago, it's like a crown in Jerusalem surrounding the Knesset, the Supreme Court, and the new National Library. All blue and white people. I'm there also, if you can find, I don't. Demonstration in seeing the future of the State of Israel as equality, as state of democracy, worrying about future. So we are going to talk a little bit about the short history of not having a constitution. We'll move to the basic laws, the basic changes, the frequent changes, amendments, and what is the toll that we paid through the changes that we have made through the years, hundreds. And we are about to do more in the coming weeks. The so-called 1992 revolution, and then the current events of the last month. I tried even to make it updated until today's afternoon, the announcement of the Prime Minister. We were accepted to the family of the nations in condition, like any nation. And the condition in Balfour's statement, he was the Minister of Colonies 1917, 1918, was that we are allowed to have a Jewish home for the Jews, a home for the Jews in Palestine, in conditions that we take care about other people in the area, as you can see in blue and in white. And this national home for the Jewish people will be built by them with the help of us, the British mandate, 1917. 47 United Nations made a decision, the happiest moment for 2,000 years for Jews ever. They were officially accepted by the family of the nations. This is the partition decision. People dance in the streets, and that was the idea. Let's have the Jewish state in yellow, the green state, the Arabic, the Palestinian state, and the orange will be international religious areas under the inspection of the United Nations. And what's interesting, and it's worth reading it, you can read it in the internet, to read the details of this decision, 181 of the United Nations. They were professional, they meant business, they sent a commission to make the business, and some of us followed verbatim, sentence after sentence, in what they said in order to be accepted, like good students. So these are the sections of the decision, and if I have just to isolate the relevant elements from this partition decision, it said that this commission will elect a provisional government, not by elections, will appoint them. This provisional government will set the arrangements for elections, election within 2 months for constituent assembly, not for a parliament, for a constitutional assembly. And that was the condition of the nations. And it says also that you should build militia, you can strike coins, you can start building states, you and the Palestinians. We grabbed it, our neighbors rejected it, and the other condition, as I said, dealt also with the content of the idea of the constitution that is going to be written, taking care of the minorities, be careful about egalitarian rights, as one can expect. And at the end, they gave a bonus. The ticket at the end, you finish doing the homework, come with a declaration. At declarations, you finished your homework. So many of us know the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, which is heavily influenced by your Declaration of Independence, as long as we go to the history of the writing it. All of that is interesting, but not for tonight. So these were the homeworks. That was the homework. You remember the date, yes? November 47. The Brits are going to leave us, so a declaration has to be written. A government is appointed. The government has to declare something. So they had a declaration in the eve. It was Friday afternoon. At night, the Brits are supposed to leave. The declaration was given at noon in Tel Aviv. It was kept as a secret. Don't tell everybody. They sent few invitations. And when they came to announce, to read the declarations, hundreds were in the streets. You know, in Israel, there are no secrets. Everybody said, I'm telling you, but don't tell anybody else. So they didn't tell anybody else. You go to the footage. There are many films of this period. You can see it. So hundreds sat in the streets of Tel Aviv, and they decided to announce the following. First, historical ideological introduction, Holocaust, history of the Jews and the land of Israel. The second part was a very operational part, provision regarding establishing of a state, announcing of a state, and having elections. Within few months, we'll elect a constitutional assembly, and this abolishment of they will write the constitution, and in the constitution, they will draft also the elements of elections, parliament, so on and so forth, whatever one writes in the constitution. And it goes to the details, you can see it. So they wrote that the constitution will be adopted until October 1st, yes? We are in May, until October, we have a constitutional assembly. And this assembly will be elected, and then they will write a constitution. And it says something about the content, according to the instructions that they were given by the United Nations. It has to deal with equality, with freedom, with the needs, with the needy, freedom of move, freedom of speech. Whatever constitution is expected to include is written in this declaration of the State of Israel, written in May 15, 1948. That was the idea. They meant good. They really went for elections for Constitutional Assembly. And it also dealt with the neighbors in cooperation with the world agencies, like the United Nations, as we are promised. I mean, we have to continue to cooperate with those who gave us permission to be a nation. I mean, you can be a nation historically by education, by many other things. But if you want to get a ticket and later on to be accepted to the United Nations, these were the preconditions. We feel them, you see, we'll come report to the United Nations, and then we invite the Arab neighbors. At that time it was Arab, nowadays we call it Palestinians. So we invited them, we invite those of you who are Jewish to come to spend your time in Israel. The gates are open. That was the message. Elections took place, not at the moment that they thought, because war started. The war was demanding. Majority of the population was involved in this war, many wounded, Many were killed. And we ended it with a great success. If you go back to the partition plan, so majority of the land was in the hands of the state of Israel, and there was no Palestinian state. Other part was taken by the Jordanians until 1967, and they had elections. And in the elections for the Constituent Assembly, a decision was made, and you heard beforehand, firsthand, what was the message. They wanted to have a Constituent Assembly, to write a constitution, but a decision was made, let's have a parliament starting to work. And the historical moment was lost. You can say that 1776 is a historical moment, yes or no? Brits, yes, it was. And the result is there. In many countries, there is a historical moment, the fall of the walls of Berlin. You rewrite your constitution. It's a paradigm of a good constitution, very detailed and a very interesting one. And there are moments that you lose. You go to war. It's a question of death and life. It's a question of future. So Brits left, and left part of it in the hands of the Jordanians and some other from the Arab Leagues. And small people were successful in the war, as I said, and went for elections in January 1949. When the election was over, and they had now a result of elections without a constitution, the question is, what do we have in our hands? So the floor decided that since we have to start running a state, we cannot continue running according to the British laws. Part of them were annulled already in 1948 at the beginning when the Brits left, but it's not enough. And you must run a state, the business, the economy, the coming Jews knocking on doors, waiting to come, more than came beforehand. So they made it as the following. The whole country is one region, not divided to regions, and each region elects its representatives. The elected body is elected by proportional relative results. It's one chamber, not two chambers. The reflection of the results is actually the reflection of the government. The government is made as a coalition with the consent of parties who would agree to the main principles that the big party decided upon, but not necessarily the big party, but the parties that can make a coalition, and the others are the opposition. They are not playing in the full game that the others play. And what about the constitution? So here is the structure. So we have the ministers, the constituency, we have the legislator in the yellow, and we had just judicial systems that was already elected in the times of the Brits. So many of the building blocks of the state, of the Jewish state, were built during the years of 1917 to 1948. They knew that we are going to have a state. Therefore, they dealt with the economy, they dealt with the money, with the agriculture, with the drafting of the soldier. Part of it was illegally, part of it was with the help of the Brits. But at the end, they finished with this structure, which is very simple. It's a primitive reflection of the British system, because it's one chamber, it's one region, it's proportional. And here is the problem I want to emphasize now, and now you understand the power, the importance of the judicial element. You do not have balances here. You have the legislator, which is actually the reflection of the government, and vice versa. The government is the power. Everybody wants to be in the government, the ones who run the business. But at the same time, this floor of the legislator cannot rebel because they are run by the government. It's a back-to-back reflection of the structure that is made according to the elections, the proportional results of the elections. So who's going to control the government? Is an option that a head of committee invites a minister to report to the committee and rejects him. He's in the same party. Tomorrow he's not head of the committee. At least he's in danger. Maybe there is an option that the opposition is inviting the government. But only one committee was given in the hands of the opposition. If you have the power, you share the pieces among the ones who are starving, namely your people, not the others. So, and the other result, many times, you give disproportional power to minority parties. Why? Because if you want to build a coalition, sometimes you need a small, tiny parties in order to fill the gap. You have 60 or 59 and you want to make it. We have, I didn't mention it, 120 members of the House. So you want to make a majority, 61. In order to make it, you have to buy. You buy not necessarily with money, you buy with other values. They care about kibbutzim, about the agriculture and the kibbutzim. They care about the drafting of the yeshiva kids. They care about budgets to the communist schools. They'll come to the government, and the price is relatively small. The question comes later on, can you justify it in front of the law? It's not by chance that we do not have equality in many of the laws, because some rejected it because there is no equality. It has to be a Jewish state. So whenever you talk about Jewish state, what about other minorities? Are they equal citizens as individuals? For sure, they are far from being equal when it comes to be a group. Arabs, ultra-Orthodox, LGTB, and many others. If you are a minority, you have to fight for your rights, and it's not simple whenever you make a coalition. You can get a lot when you negotiate. You come to the table, you'll get a lot, even if you are a tiny, less than 1% party. 2 years passed, they tried to write a constitution. Around 15 constitutions were on the table at that time. One of them was a world professional, Mr. Cohen, later on professor in our university, the Hebrew University, and he wrote on the Irish constitution, his PhD, and he was invited by the government to write the constitution of the State of Israel. He wrote draft number 1, draft number 2, draft number 3, and all of them were rejected. Either it's too religious or non-religious, too Jewish or too secular. The taste wasn't there. But it's more than that. Who has the power already of the floor will give up the power. Ben-Gurion was the prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. He had the power. He had a party who ruled the state of Israel for many years, not 1 decade, many decades. He didn't foresee it, but he felt it at least. And he didn't want to have any power above him, of any judiciary, of any elevated laws of constitution. And he was the one who explained patiently to Begin, it is not a time now. Why? Because we have few rifts that will be very, very, very difficult to bridge. 1, religious and irreligious. 2, Jews and Arabs. Jews are the minority. That's Siri. She wants me to say something else. So Jews are the minority, Arabs are the majority. So what kind of a constitution are you making for Jewish state when you are a minority in the state? You still wait for people to come. You remember the end of the declaration. Jews have to come. Then we may be a majority in the... So when they come, they have different cultures, languages. They want something different. Maybe, hopefully, some thought, maybe they are religious, or maybe they are secular, or maybe they know languages or other systems. You cannot make a constitution while you are still in the run. So it wasn't, at the beginning it was a fight, surviving. These years we ate by rations. I was born almost in these years. We still found, recently when we tidy up some of the rooms at home, we found the rations for milk and bread. We had to buy it, but we couldn't buy more than 2 bottles of milk and, let's say, 1 loaf of bread for a day. So that was the situation. Dov Yosef was the minister, and he made the cuts and made us having what we need. Realizing now they were accepted to the United Nations, it's not a question of United Nations. The opposition, headed by Menachem Begin, kept demanding, not asking, kept demanding having a constitution. Who is going to protect us from you, David Ben-Gurion? Only the constitution. So he insisted of having a constitution, and it was brought to the floor. And the head of the committee that I had the honor to chair after him, Professor Mr. Harari, his son later on became the president of Weizmann Institute, decided the 3 decisions that you see here on the board. That we are going to have a constitution, number 3, but it will be built like the German constitution on the basis of basic laws. It will be built by chapters. Each chapter of basic laws will be later on a chapter in the constitution. So that was the idea. And you see, so the first class had directed the committee, and this committee was supposed to walk in this path, highway maybe, to make it. So now the question, what is the task of the Knesset? What hat does it wear? Is it a hat of a legislator, or is it a hat of a constituent assembly? So if you go to the Knesset nowadays, everybody will tell you we wear 2 hats. One is of a legislator, so we make the laws, the bills, the rules, and we are the only ones who can make the constitution. According to Harari decision. You go back from Harari decision, you go to the first Knesset. You go back from the Knesset decision, you go back to the Declaration of Independence. You go back from the Declaration of Independence, you go to the partition decision in 181 of the United Nations. So all is built nicely on series of decisions made through the years, and we started writing basic laws urgently. I drafted the basic human rights that I drafted in the constitutions that I drafted in 2006, 2009, and see how many human rights were waiting to be legislated. None of them at that time was written. I mean, you can say that by nature, people respect liberty, people think about equality. What are the rules of the game? Nobody said. What is basic law? How do you make a basic law to be different from the other laws? Can you strike down the basic law? Who can strike down a basic law? What does basic law has in comparison to regular law, to regulations? You know, 3 levels of legislation that you have. You have constitution, you have first level of legislation, regular bills, and then it goes to instructions, regulations. So what are the rules? Shall we go back to square one? The first basic law that was written, it took almost 10 years to write. Basic law Knesset. How this body, how this house is working. And this is the only entrenched basic law that we have. For changing in this basic law, you need 61 hands. Almost none of the below. This one, yes. Why? Because these are the rules of the game. How many changes, amendments have we made, have they made, have all of the governments made in this basic law? Around 40. It's basic law. So why do you have to change it? 7a of this basic law tells you who is not allowed to be elected to the Knesset. And that's the real mission. I do not want such a party to be in the Knesset. If they are not coming to the Knesset, my chances are higher. So who are the not? The not is the racist, Kahana. The not are the Palestinians, because they do not maybe respect state of Israel as Jewish and democratic state. So this 7a was changed again and again, and in the coming months I wanted to change it again, part of the revolutions that we are about to face. So these are the laws. There are 13 of them, and yes, you know, you do not have to know colors. Only 2 deal with human rights. Only 2. While your constitution, you know exactly. Us, only 2. It didn't work. They tried. Basic laws. They brought equality. They couldn't do it because of the coalition with the ultra-Orthodox. They wanted to do freedom of speech. There was a problem of the government. They didn't like it. There was a freedom of move. Ministry of Interiors didn't like it. And so on and so forth. So in your case, to amend, you have to go, I don't know if it's a paradise or hell. But look, and you know how many amendments have you done through the years, 200 years. Look, that's the way, but we do not have any rules for this game. Not everything is so bitter. So through the years, we made few laws and we mentioned equality. Already in 51. So 1 year after, it's not a basic law, it's a law. Women equal rights. You see what is the content of the law, but it's equal. National education law specifies equal education. Equal opportunity to work was written in 88. So equality at least is mentioned, but not in basic laws. Why not in basic laws? I already mentioned. And then came Deus ex machina, came God. 1992, there was a coalition that enabled writing the 2 basic laws that we are going to read now. Basic law, human dignity and liberty, and the other one, basic law of freedom of occupation. And in each of these 2 basic laws, it's deliberately written that any law that is going to reject these basic laws could be struck down. Who's going to strike it down? Not the legislator. He wrote it. Judiciary. That was the invitation. Official invitation for the judiciary to strike down laws vis-a-vis basic laws. What was the result of the vote in the night that it was voted? 32 to 21. You remember, out of 520. A few years later, in 94, they reread the law, amended few clauses in it, and then it was 75 to 0. I mention it because nowadays, some of the people say, what's the value of this basic law? Nobody voted for it. It was like thieves in the middle of the night that did it. No. It was done after years of work. And next time that it was amended, voted again, and changed, it was 75 to 0. You do not have many laws voted in this majority. And you see, they even dared at that time to go back to the Declaration of Independence. Not to mention equality. No. But it's for reaching the goals of the Declaration of Independence and to serve the state of Israel as a Jewish state. And this is the limitation clause saying the following: there shall be not violation in the rights under this basic law except by law befitting, now 3 conditions, befitting values of the state of Israel, enacted for a proper purpose, and in the right measurement, right proportions. These are the 3 conditions. You can strike down a law rejecting basic law, human dignity and liberty in 3 conditions. And you can. You actually invite it. If there is a law that answers these 3 goals, you can strike down. If it is not answering, you can strike it down. How many times did Supreme Court strike down laws rejecting this law? And the next one is one case, I'll mention it, 20 times since 1992. So 30 years passed, and these were 30 times that laws were struck down because they rejected human rights and now freedom of occupation. The beginning is the same, copied and pasted. They also mentioned the way, except by law befitting and so on and so forth. To this one, they even gave a procedure in clause number 8, enabling you to vote 61, to have 61 votes if you want to try to reject this law. And once it was voted, that was an issue of non-kosher meat imported to Israel. It was the interest of the Muslims and the Jews. According to this law, you can import as much as non-kosher meats that you want, and they rejected it by making the law against this basic law in 1994. So this was the revolution in 1992. And from then on, Supreme Court find ways to discuss usually regular laws vis-a-vis basic laws. That was the usual. But Supreme Court never struck down, never struck down a basic law, up to now. It might happen. It might happen because if you have a non-constitutional constitution element, it goes back to a justice in Chicago at the end of the 19th century. He taught us that in this case, if it doesn't serve constitutional values, you may rethink whether to strike it down because it rejects constitution by a non-constitutional article, even if it is a constitution. The condition could be, for example, if you made it in a procedure that is not befitting a basic law. You didn't vote to it in 61, for example. Oh no, it's basic law, but by the title. It is basic law for making you awakened when I'm lecturing. I mean, it's important because there are maybe 70 people, but one is falling asleep, maybe not yet because I'm shouting. But for the one, you make a basic law. And they made it, this government started its service with making a basic law for a criminal. I mean, he defined himself criminal. He admitted this, that he made this problem. He took the money from income tax and so on and so forth. They made a law enabling him to serve as a minister. Now you have a basic law. In common terms, he didn't mention the name Deri. That's his name. You don't have to remember because we do not speak about specific examples. But we do, whenever you do a personal law and you make it in this way, it's a question about the procedure. Is it basic law? Or if it is rejecting values, permanent values, you decide that from now on, justices will be elected only by the government. I mean, it's the right thing, they have the power. In the States, it's okay. You have 2 chambers, you have proportional elections, you have this kind of emissaries to elect the president, the electing body, and you have a president and a house. We do not have it. So what are our checks and balances? If you decide that the government elects the justices, so who are the justices? Your people. How are they going to review your decisions tomorrow? Not only laws, any decision, any procedure. You decided to confiscate, let's take the new apartment of Professor Brenner, to confiscate it, so they can take it. The first case brought to court in Israel, 1948, 4 months after the declaration of independence, was a person from Tel Aviv that the Minister of Finance confiscated his apartment. He said, why did you do it? He said, we need it for the ministry office. You don't use it. We checked after you. It's nice. I mean, is it a reason? You do not need a court for these cases? And the other problem of the years after was consistent amendment of basic laws in a certain junction. And you do not have to be prophets to know what is the junctions that they want to change basic laws, and you know exactly what basic laws are going to change. It's the day you make a coalition. Let's say that the basic law said, and it said, not more than 18 members of the cabinet. And you start negotiating, and they want at least 4 ministers. You already sold 18 to your people. So you have to change the basic law. Basic law government. You want to have extra budget for this purpose. It's against the basic law government that instruct you how to share the budget between the parties. You do not want to have a budget. It's against basic law finance. So changing of the basic laws became a habit. It's easy to do. You remember the chess game. There are no rules for the game. You can do it 2-1. 2 will vote for, 1 will vote against, and then we have a basic law. Last night, we had a new basic law. After Mr. Derry was rejected by Supreme Court, there is a new basic law Derry, and there is new basic law Derry is entrusting him to be a minister by the following decision. Any decision of the government of appointment of a minister could not be taken to court, and this is basic law government. Amendment number 16. 2 weeks ago, we had only 8 amendments. Amendment number 16. In 2 weeks, 8 more was entered. So flexibility, well, you do basic laws. Mr. Harari asked us, you do basic laws in order to strengthen the state, in order to put good foundations for future constitution, and look what we did. We went to 2 revolutions you're not aware of, and that's one of the ideas I know. Nowadays, if you are worried, maybe we can overcome constitutional crisis. One was we adopted your system in '92. We elected prime minister, straight elections. It's against basic law. Usually it's according to parties. We took the American system, but the House is elected according to the Israeli system. So 3 won the lottery. Netanyahu, Ehud Barak, and Arik Sharon. None of them was capable of running the state because the parliament was against, and small parties were flourishing more than before. Huge mistake. So in '91, they changed the law. In 2001, they changed it again. They took it back to 1968, the original basic laws that you work accordingly, but we amended, as I said, yesterday night was the 16th. And the other revolutions that we went through, we had 1 state and 2 governments. Have you heard about something like that? I lived there. And it wasn't a joke. It was in a Corona time. He says yes, he says no. He says black, the other says no. White. Why? Because we had to protect somebody from court. He had to be promised that he's still substitute prime minister in the time that he's not a prime minister. And he gets the house and all other things. More than 40 different constitutions were put in the table of the Knesset through the years. As I told you, at the beginning it was very intense, and unluckily it didn't work. I can testify for myself. I fooled myself that I could vote on it. I told you already, 15 chapters, 250 articles. I had even a date. And the prime minister decided to resign. And for years, until 2 months ago, I doubted. I doubted. Maybe we didn't need it. We could work without it. Nowadays, I see what is the power of constitution. Agreed upon rules. Rules of the game are set by Constitution. It's urgent that we have it. And what happened 2 months ago? 2 months ago, all the feelings of people who felt rejected, minorities, not accepted, had the feelings the Supreme Court is the one that dictates the state businesses. 20 cases, I told you, 20 cases. Only, and 3 times the Knesset rejected, overrode the decision of Supreme Court by detouring it by a different law. But the claims were the court is not elected. They limit the expansion of the settlements in the West Bank. They limit the needs of the ultra-Orthodox society. They want us to serve equally. They are not taking care of our special needs, education needs. And there was a resentment of, at the most, 2 precise circles. One was the ultra-Orthodox and the other one was the national Zionist religious party that represented mostly the West Bank settlements. And they accused the court to be serving the left and not the right with the liberal ideas of Supreme Court whenever they protected, for example. And I deliberately take this example. I know that it's rhetoric. There is a place, settlement in the West Bank, and there is a school there. Ultra-Orthodox school did not accept part of the girls from the ultra-Orthodox society. Why? Because the parents came from Arab countries, not the parents, the grandparents came from Arab countries. They are from the Sephardi elements. And this is Western school. So who's going to protect these girls? Supreme Court did it. So is it pro-Orthodox, pro-ultra-Orthodox, or against Orthodox? It depends who's the kids you ask. This is one example of interference of Supreme Court. And here is verbatim the message of the Minister of Justice of the State of Israel 3 months ago. I'm writing this set of laws in order to achieve, 1, change the composition of the committee for the selection of justices and give the government the majority of the committee. 2, to strengthen the authority in the position of the legislature against, he's the enemy, against the Supreme Court through significant limitation of judicial review. No more judicial review as it used to be. Stop reviewing us. We know what is good because we got the votes and we got the power. 3, to limit the use of reasoning and reasonableness in the decision of court. I mean, you cannot say that it's not reasonable that a criminal will serve as a minister in the cabinet. That was the last decision of the Supreme Court, and they are not allowed if these changes are moving. But it's not one law. So let's say, to achieve it, we can change the structure of the judiciary. And it's enough. You have different judiciary. They are not interfering. They are not using reasoning. And they behave. They are the ones whom we elect. It's more than enough. So change it and go home. There is another option. Let's go to the legislature. Give them more power. They can override the decisions of Supreme Court. 61 will, let's say 50th. 61 will be enough to override the Supreme Court. It's a small majority. It does not reflect values of democracy, if you want to reflect many ideas. But that's another idea. So this one will be sufficient. There is another option. Forget about everything, but you have gatekeepers. These are the legal justices, legal advisors of the ministries. In Israel, legal advisor has got the authority to prevent you, namely the minister, me at the university, We have a legal advisor. We know that you have to respect. She protects us. She protects not only the minister. You have got many examples that army officers of the Israeli IDF went to countries abroad, were blamed of war crimes, and thanks to the fact that Supreme Court has this judicial review over decisions of the government, actually made them the option of going without being blamed, and they didn't even stand in front of court. They didn't have to the police released them in the airport. They could go back home as every other citizen. So it is a case that either the judiciary or the legal advisors are the gatekeepers. You remember how balanced is our system with the chamber and with the government. The problem with this government was that, yes, changing and limiting and granting more power to the Knesset and then stopping them from using sovereignty. And now be patient, you can see, and later on you can get the slides if you want. Ma nishtana before Passover. What's the difference? We used to have 9 members of the committee for selection of justices. We used to have 3 justices from the Supreme Court, 2 elected by the Bar Association, 2 elected by the Knesset from the coalition, and 1 elected from the opposition, and 2 ministers of the government. You counted well? Who's got a majority? The government. They have 3 plus 2 plus another 2, yes? So they have a majority. But there is another law, I had the honor to write it, saying that you cannot appoint a Supreme Court justice unless you have 7 votes in the committee. So in this case, you have a veto. You do not have a majority. But the others who dislike this justice because he's not trained enough, or she's maybe too much whenever it comes to be too liberal, you don't like her, fine, you need 7 votes. So each part has got veto on the other. So when you appoint a justice for the Supreme Court, it must be a result of a moderation, of an agreement. We are running out of time, so I'll finish in 2 minutes. You can see that they changed it to 9, but the government, they took off the Bar Association. The justice says is only 1 Supreme Court justice, and the 2 others are appointed by the Minister of Justice. And then it comes to the Knesset members. You have got 3 to come from the coalition, and then it comes to the ministers. You have 3, so you have got a majority. And there is now a softened idea. It was 4 days ago, and this one is also left us with the majority of the government. So you end up that the justices are actually the yes men or women of the government, otherwise are not elected. Now it's publicized that in chambers, the Minister of Justice said, I want one thing only. Forget about all the changes that I want to make. You'll see them in a second. They announced they are going to have 4 major changes. Yes, suspensors and belt, to make sure that the pants are still on your feet. So the change, he said, for us it's enough that we change the structure of the committee, but we insist that the majority is in the hands of the government, and 2, wait until we elect 4 justices, and then we are done. Wait until we change the world. That's democracy. Now, judicial review, I'm not going to it now. You can ask me later. Here are the elements of the judicial review that change it. You're not allowed to have a judicial review on most of the laws. You can immunize a law before it is voted by making it protected by voting on it with 61 votes. The Knesset can override anything that was made by the Supreme Court, and there is no precedent in any decision of the Supreme Court. And then legal advisors are not more than advisors. From tomorrow morning, they are not gatekeepers. It's an option. He told you no, okay, you do yes. Or he told you yes, you do no. It became an option. So we killed the gatekeepers, and they stopped the reasonable-based ideas. And there are more to mention, more ideas that come after. They want to strike down basic law, human rights, because it wasn't voted with 61. They want to stop the standing in front of the court. Nowadays the standing is very, very liberal. No, you have to prove that you are connected. Nobody can protect you, the girl, from this settlement. If you're a Sephardi girl, you have to come, you have to plea, otherwise it won't go. See, that's another change. And they wanted to extend even the Knesset time more than it was appointed to at the beginning. So this is the initiative, and the legal advisors of the committee said, we never heard of a combination of such laws. They took the extreme from any system, systems of the states, system of Germany, system of every country. That was the message. No, other countries have constitution, other countries have balance of powers. Number two was they took not only the extreme, it's overlapping. They took means that protect too much. And I talk also about the method, and with that I'm ending. Mistrust. Nobody trusts the prime minister, so they had to get everything in advance. They stopped any legislation in the country, not over the needy, not defense needs, no any of the promises before the elections. There was one track for the last 2 months. This, what they call reform, we call revolution. There was an aggressive process, not of a making of a constitution, no deliberation. I went 10 times to the committee, tried to talk. There are not many people who were the head of this committee beforehand. So I was among the non-many. I wasn't given a permission to talk, so I wrote a few articles in the newspapers that changed the rules of the game in the middle of the game, because usually you do it, as you can see, behind a veil of ignorance. He came with 6 pages. You can read it now in English. 6 pages. He called it People's Directive. 60 articles, taking us from the beginning, from Aleph, from A to Z, starting with basic law. What are the rules of basic laws? Secondly, how you make a regular law, who has the permission to override, who has the permission to strike down. This is the initiative of President Herzog. And if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I may have said that it doesn't have any chance. I'm more optimistic today. A, because we saw the results of the demonstrations. We have a pause, not a stop. But a pause is something, because the Minister of Justice knows, and he said, we are not going to have this revolution. It stopped, and we are not going to have it. So he realizes that it was a real problematic procedure and a real problematic combination of laws. And he knows that if we stopped, we may not have an opportunity to continue, and it's good. But maybe now the discourse comes back. And if I'm asked, do you believe, Menachem, that we go back to write a constitution? 2 months ago, I would say no. Fight, yes, but not a constitution. Nowadays, the negative part of the demonstrations is not over yet. But when it is over, you need something to fight for. And that's the positive part. So we have our draft waiting, maybe, under the dust, to be taken, removed the dust, and to reread it and vote in it. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much for this amazing tour de force through the constitutional history of a non-constitution. Let me start exactly where you ended. So you say maybe now, at this very moment, because for those of you who didn't listen to the news this afternoon, by the way, so Prime Minister Netanyahu gave a speech today where he said he halts for now the process of the judicial overhaul, at least until the holidays are coming, Passover, and then the Israeli holidays are coming, Yom Ha'atzmaut, and the Independence Day, and the day of the all kinds of other remembrances. But let me ask you the question: if this government, and I could, of course, hear you, there are lots of fears which you share. If this government has the power to write a constitution, is it a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, could it be more dangerous than not having a constitution?
Bad. Look, I condensed for 45 minutes to 64 minutes in my presentation, so I have to be short now. No, the answer is, I hope that this government does not write a constitution. I hope that we have elections in short time. Maybe it's not short time, but I hope. And I hope that when we have these elections, we still feel the bitter taste of not having a constitution. And this bitter taste that I tried to contaminate with others when I served, this time is a present. We have to keep it.
And do you, and again, my question is just really very brief, and I see you can answer with one word if you want. No. But do you see it, I mean, as I said in the beginning, we have never seen Israel on the brink, and that's what Netanyahu said today, what President Herzog said the other day, on the brink of a civil war, actually. That's the words they use. Do you see a chance in all of those? I mean, what I think is all of those people coming out, hundreds of thousands. I mean, the whole country is only 9 million people living there, and about 10% of them are on the street. That's not what we saw, and I know the comparisons are always a little bit difficult, but that's not what we saw when Hungary or Poland did it. But in Israel, we see, I would say, a sign of a lot of its citizens really getting out and defending their democracy.
So I think that these are some of the greatest moments ever we had. Most of it was cultural, containing, behaved, very original, from time to time, set of demonstrations, organized. There is not too, I mean, yes, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the United States gave the money, as Netanyahu's son said 2 days ago. But beside it, the budget comes from Israeli pockets. People are concerned. People serve in the army. People volunteered. You do not have a country of volunteering percentage of the population as us, as Israel. Once I even tried to make a new organization of volunteering and started counting numbers, huge numbers of volunteers. People care. The memory of not having a state is fresh. People learn about it. People know about it, and they care about it. You do not fight with a tank to protect the body. You fight with a tank to protect the concept of the state. And we were not failing in our education. So it's moving, it is a success, and it's not left and right. You saw all variety of people come to protest, except for the Palestinians. It is another story. So I do see, I wouldn't expect it to be a fight between brothers, a fight as you described. I could see violence here and there, but I think that it wouldn't go to somebody who take guns and shoot the other.
Actually, I think what you just said is very important. Of course, about half of the Israeli population voted for this government, for the parties that make out this government. About half of the population voted for other parties. But what we see in the polls now is, well, maybe the two camps wouldn't be dramatically different, but we see that in the right-wing camp there is a considerable number of, especially Likud voters, who do not support the overhaul.
Now we talk politics, so I want to assure you, Israel is very right-wing. And if you go to the opposition, it's still very right-wing. So don't fool yourselves or myself. It's if you are fine with it, it's fine. But you have to realize that Gantz and his party, part of the party of Lapid, is center to the right. It's not going to be Mapai as it used to be in the past. Not anymore.
No, actually, as for the poll, the Labour Party, which ruled Israel for the first 30 years, would not even make the 3.75 or 25% hurdle to get in. I'd rather have you ask the questions, and as always, you want to start with students.
You talked a bit about how the Haredim and the Dadi Leumi, the religious Zionists, are not, big fans of the Supreme Court. So one thing I like about kind of the system we have here is there's this kind of civic religion where Democrats and Republicans, we both like the Constitution, essentially. What can Israel do to make sure that all the different sections of Israeli society have a civic religion when they make the new Constitution? That's not just that the seculars like it and the religious don't, or vice versa.
To decide that it is not a Jewish and democratic state, and there is no way that it decides, because that was the condition. It has to be a Jewish state. So it's a precondition that you do not have it here. The First Amendment of yours is against the First Commandment of any observant Jew, as you know. And the second issue is that you have to be patient. It won't take 200 years. But it takes time. Even here, in 76, people still fought, and slavery was still among the habits. So not in one day. We are impatient, and we did already two constitutional revolutions. It's enough for the first 75 years, and let's wait for the nice process. Why was it very important at that time for me to write a constitution? Because I thought that in writing it, you create a new discourse between parts of the society. So the draft that I had was with the help of the ultra-Orthodox. In that time, Arabs wrote 3 constitutions as part of the process. Part of it was absorbed in us, part of it not, but there was a feeling around that we make it. So you need to create the ambience, and you have to be very patient.
My question to you is twofold. One, how will this round of reforms fuel the anti-Israel rhetoric we see around the world, and how might it damage the greater nation's perspective on the state? And two, I have some deja vu as we were sitting here two years ago leading up to the summer. How likely do you think we'll see an election in the next 6 months?
The latter, I hope, but I don't have any clue to tell you. The government is far from being strong as it used to be 2 months ago. I mean, they made everything to commit suicide. And so they were saved at the end, for the time being. The toll for making a coalition is very high. But I want to say something positive about it. You are used to the American system. One takes everything at the end, yes? We cannot afford it. We have so many cleavages in the society. I mentioned few. So many cleavages that you need the flow of the Knesset to direct these dissatisfactions into channels of participation. If it was one party takes all, then streets were full with demonstrations like in Latin America, And we are lucky not to have it because of multi-party system. Everybody has his share once in a while. For question number one, the damage is there, and it's only the beginning. Why? Because it's going to repeat. I mean, people will cite, repeat, and use. There are few problems. I'm not going to talk about BDS on 1 foot or on 1 minute. But we are different in the region. Neighbors do not necessarily like us there. There are guilt feelings, especially among the well-to-do people of this kind, Jews around the world, and they feel that they did maybe many evils while doing their money, so they blame of being rich and influential. And it comes to other disproportional power of the Jews that comes from maybe minority will to achieve. Saying that, the damage is there, and you have to be in the front just to tell the people it was an accident. But let's hope that the accident is fixed. And I cited you, we had 2 major ones, and we tried to fix it. We'll try to fix it again.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask a little bit about the presidency, because from just what I've seen in the headlines, President Herzog has become a lot more involved in this whole process than is typically expected or performed by an Israeli president. So my question is, what would you foresee as the future role of the president, possibly with the creation of an actual constitution? Do you think that the powers of the president could be expanded upon, decreased, or changed in some way in order to create a better balance of power?
Right question. They tried a few times in the past, and the Knesset refused. Nobody wants power to be taken from his hands or her hands. So in this case, we tried to give more power to the president, and the whole trend is to take any power. He hasn't got any. You know, he can stick his nose only in the handkerchief. That's the rule. But in this case, he showed us, and he taught us a lesson, that whenever there is nobody around, he was around. And he actually could pay in his throne. People could reject his suggestions, and maybe it'll happen in the coming month. But for the time being, he did it in a respectable manner, in a delicate manner, and it's now on the table. It's not his, yes, it's the people's. So the people can take it or leave it. And he left it for us. And that's the question of Professor Brenner. I think that we'll take it. If not all of it, parts of it, and it was already agreed upon by the opposition. I mean, it took 7 minutes to the coalition to say no. Long time, but 7 minutes. So in this case, he showed us what is a leader in such a time, even though I do not foresee any change in the structure of the state towards what you have here, because we will be very careful. We had already a president that was in jail, sex harassment.
I was wondering if you think that the U.S. should get involved in this decision, and if so, whether we can do so without whether we can influence the Israeli government without, affecting the security of Israel, such as by conditioning aid.
You did it. 4 times in a row. Same slogan, repeated itself. It was first by the Minister of Defense, then by the Secretary of the State, then by the President himself, and it was clear-cut that our steps are not accepted. Then it was adopted by the German President and by the French President. So in many ways, you again led the world. You showed the way. There is a certain point that if you put too much of a pressure, you lose your authority. So you did it. I think that you did it in a delicate enough way not to be rejected violently. But behind, everybody knows in Israel that you are there. And you are very, very much dissatisfied. Yes, Hungary is with us, and Poland is with us, and maybe even India. And if we insist, maybe Putin will come. But no, we did some evil things with the Ukraine. Not too much, but still. I think that in this case, you are smart enough to play it diplomatically, but clear enough to send the message. Why do we have a pause? We have a pause thanks to the following. A, the union decided this morning to stop the country. So still the unions master the country. So no flights, no work, nothing. Everything was stopped. Two were the numbers in the polls. Professor Brenner hinted to it. The government lost more than 10 seats already in the polls. You cannot afford it. 3, refusing of service. It's not just that you refuse A or B or C. These are the ones who do the daily work. We are in a war state. We call it war in between wars. WIW. So that's the status in Israel, vis-a-vis Syria, vis-a-vis Lebanon, vis-a-vis Gaza. So who are the ones who do it? You know, it's a chirurgical work done daily by the SIGINT people, namely the computer people, and by the pilots. They volunteer to serve. They have to serve 30 days a year, but they serve 80 days a year. They come only to 30 years by the book. So the combination of these create, and the last and not the least one, is the message that they got from the world. So the answer is, yes, you are there, and thank you for that.
My question really is that after hearing you speak tonight, it very much seems that Israel is on a very unique path to try and create a constitution and develop laws that are not only based around a compromise of the different sects of the of the Jewish religion, as well as working on an almost law based around legal realism, public opinion based off of legal precedent set in the past. My question to you is, do you believe that the Israeli government should focus more on trying to create compromise between the different points of religion in the Jewish faith to create compromise, or should we move towards a more neutral legal stance?
I'll answer your question in a different way. The Prime Minister announced in the first day after he was elected that this government has got 4 goals. Iran, against. Saudi Arabia, 4. Needy economy, world inflation, 3. Security in the streets. My advice to the government is to take a real pause and to go for the goals that it announced for. They are going to gain a lot. A, trustfulness. B, support of the public. C, a stage to continue with what they want on the basis of compromise that will take place in the coming 2 years. It will be a huge mistake if they start the process after the secular high holidays, namely after Yom Ha'atzmaut, because then the hell will be in the streets, and now we know how to do it. We practice it already in the rain. We know how to do it also during the summer.
My question mostly deals with one of my interests in history. I like to learn a lot about extremism in democratic governments to see like patterns, how they rise, how they obtain power. And I wanted to ask you some questions on the current government and what it seems to be its sort of path towards that area of ideology. So I know of, I'm not as learned as I should be, but I do know that there is someone important in the government of Netanyahu, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the names, by the name of Smotrich, and he has a lot of controversial statements about Palestinians, about the government's actions. And his party has some, I believe, influence from Kahanist ideology. So my question is, if he or his ideas are to gain more prevalence in the government, do you believe it is by the outright increase of influence by his party, the influence of his ideas on Likud, or a different idea such as in other countries in the military? Do you think that that sort of could influence how the government is run, especially since the Israeli military is so unique in how it presents itself?
There is an understanding among the world, and I'm sitting here in front of specialists, so I take the liberty at least of saying it, even if it is in mistaken way, that part of the science to autocratic regimes is absorbing the extremists. Smotrich party is the used to be the national religious party. It used to be a very moderate party. They were for negotiating the West Bank. They were
father-in-law.
Yes. And they were really, as I said, really moderate one. It's not anymore, and he was enforced. That's the idiom. You can go back to the newspapers by the prime minister to adopt to his party Kahana student, and that's the minister of police. You said Minister of Defense. No, that's the Minister of Police. And he was not accepted all along. The Prime Minister never wanted to take a picture with him. It's not my problem. I would take because I don't mind. I think that my name is strong enough that nobody will overshadow if the picture is taken. The Prime Minister never wanted to take a picture with him. He was rejected each time and again from being elected to the Knesset. But a miracle happened. And he was koshered in Hebrew. Yes, he was accepted. Why? Because a mastermind that wanted to save votes of the rights and the extreme rights calculated that this minister, nowadays, at that time, he was indicted once. So this person has got, let's say, 20,000 votes, or maybe 100,000 votes. So it's counted. So he made Smotrich to take him. Smotrich is another problem, and I want all of us to share with the problem. While he is the student of Kahana, and he rejects any minority living in Israel, he softened his terminology, but he used usually to say killing the Arabs. That was the message. So Smotrich comes with a messianic idea that in the steps of messianic times, you do not have to consider nations' ideas. I started with the nations. We were accepted in condition. We fulfill the conditions. Oh, I hope that we fulfill. By the moment that we stop fulfilling it, we think that we're in a messianic time. Okay, so God will help you. So in this case, you're not playing the political game. The problem is that he plays the political game for religious purposes. So the one is the extreme. The other one is the messianic. The combination of two is a fire that you have to be very careful. And here is the danger. If you look at the danger of this government, these two are the danger.
I'm Dalia Linoz. I'm a senior in the School of International Service. And I was wondering, up until this point, if you think Bibi has been on a completely detached from reality, or whether or not he's acting in a genuine path towards a political game, and how you think the protests will reflect that in the coming weeks if we've reached the height right now.
First of all, I was sure that he will have a pause. I even shared it with my students and my friends, and it happened. Not because I'm a prophet, because I know that he considers, and he knows how many mistakes were done on the way, but he's a captive. He's in a trial, and he has to count his, not blessings, but at least to protect the future steps, and protecting it is by negotiating. So it's not only negotiating about coalition in the shadow. Here, there, in the horizon, there is a problem that he has to be careful with.
Thank you.
I think that he's calculated.
In recent years, it feels like the hope of some kind of lasting two-state solution has kind of dwindled. I'm wondering, once elections do happen and potentially the pendulum swings in a new direction, do you think that that could lend some kind of wind to the sails of a lasting peace agreement, or is that too much to hope for?
Too much to hope for. No, I even specified why. Count hands and see that the Knesset, the chamber, has got a majority of right-wing people. And there was a government of Bennett. He wasn't a left-wing, he's not a center. Go to Lieberman. And then I specified the name of the other parties. So I do not foresee such a step for the time being. We need to be patient, and we are.
That was really an amazing lecture, and even more impressive in the answers. And next time, when we invite you, we'll invite you to speak on what your actual expertise is, namely medieval history, North Africa, and Maimonides, the Rambam, and we'll have an even larger
I wanted to
audience.
admit, I know nothing before the 7th century. I know nothing after the 14th century. And by accident, I came to this venue. I'm proud of being in this scenery for 3.5 years, and I learned a lot. I went out of the Knesset humble. It was a great lesson for me for the future, and it is a great democracy. Israel is a great democracy. And if I had doubts through the last 2 months, I saw it in many expressions.